Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my October reads and my November TBR. I recorded this video earlier on in the month, but there was a lot of construction going on in my house, so there was a lot of background noise. So I was like, let me just refilm the video so it's better for you guys. So I'm sorry that this is going to be kind of in the middle of November, but I thought that it would be preferable for you guys to have a better quality video versus having me upload it in the middle of the month a little bit later. So, with that being said, let's get into what I read in the month of October. So I started October strong with 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. If you are unfamiliar with Holly Jackson, she did the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. If you have not read that yet and you really like thrillers and mysteries, I would recommend reading that. I believe it is a young adult trilogy. But if you don't really like the idea of reading a trilogy or a longer book series, I would highly recommend this because this is a standalone book. This book is actually told in third perspective point of view. So you're not getting the point of view of the main character, but you are hearing most of her inner thoughts and what she's thinking versus the other characters, but it is third person, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain. So you're following our main character, Red Kennedy, as they go on like an 18-hour road trip for their spring break from high school, I believe. They're going on this road trip. They're obviously traveling in an RV because there is 6 of them all together, so they decided they would get an RV instead of cramping in one little car. And so right before they're almost there, the RV actually breaks down. It's like the middle of the night. I believe it starts at 12 and you get an hour by hour until like 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And so you're following them as they break down in this RV, and then someone starts sniping at them. Eventually they get communication with the sniper, and the sniper explains to them that one of the 6 of them has a secret that they have to know, and they will not let them go until they figure out that secret. And they have to know the secret by the morning. That is basically the plot of this book. I gave this book 4 stars, which I don't think personally is a bad rating. Some people may say that it's a bad rating compared to what other people rated it. I've heard a lot of people say that this was one of their favorite reads, a 5-star read. They finished it in one sitting. And I think the beginning was a little bit slower paced, but once it picks up, it really does pick up, and I was reading it and didn't put it down for probably a good amount of the book, like half the book. I probably read it in all one sitting. With the characters, most of them are a means to an end. And with this book, I feel like you connected to a lot of the characters and they became really lovable, which is kind of sad because I know there's never going to be another book for this, so I won't be able to hear what comes of the characters because there is a little subplot of romance. Whenever I read a thriller or mystery, I feel like there always has to be a little subplot of romance for me to really enjoy it. And so yeah, that's why I gave it a 4 stars. I think it's pretty good, and I would recommend it if you liked A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, if you're just looking for a fast-paced thriller to read. The next book that I read in October was Curse of the Wolf King by Tessania Odette. I love this cover so much, and this, I believe, is a 5-book series, but they are all interconnected, so you don't have to read them in order, but I believe there are other characters in other books. Like, I think there's a side character in this book that's a main character of the next book. So all of these books are princess story retellings, but with fae. So they're turned into fantasy retellings. This book specifically is Beauty and the Beast retelling. So we're basically following Gemma Bellefleur, and she has this past that she doesn't want people to know about. And so she wants to move out and start her own life, so she tries to get a job. She gets an interview, and when she treks out to meet the interview person, I guess, the person who's trying to hire her, she runs into a whole bunch of wolves who happen to be fae. So she ends up creating a bargain with this fae wolf king. Basically, they devised this plan to get someone to fall in love with him to break his curse. In return, he will give her a lot of money so she can kind of do whatever she wants, start her new life, move, whatever she wants to do, as long as they can get someone to break his curse. The problem is they are in super close quarters together, very close proximity, they're living together, and as they develop further and further into this plan, Gemma starts having these feelings for the king, which kind of gets in the way of their plan and their bargain because someone has to fall in love with him for the curse to break. I really loved this book, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. And I'm so sad I didn't pick it up sooner because I gave this book 5 stars. I was having the best time reading this. Honestly, I wish the epilogue was longer because I could spend forever reading about these characters and their life together. As you know, with Beauty and the Beast, she really loves books, so there is so much beautiful writing about how books have such a great impact on people who love to read them, and their love together was just so wholesome because they become, well, they're kind of like enemies at first, and then they become friends, and then they become lovers. So you have close proximity, you have enemies to lovers, you have friends to lovers, you have found family. The found family in this book is absolutely beautiful. In fact, like I said earlier, one of the side characters is a main character in the next book. I believe it's a Cinderella retelling, and I would like to pick that up eventually. So yeah, I absolutely recommend this book. If you are new to fantasy, this is also a great book to read. The next book I picked up was There's Someone Inside Your House. If you watched my last video, I said that I didn't really know much about this book or what it was about. After reading it, I still don't really know how to explain it in a way that gives a lot of information because the back also doesn't give a lot of information. I also didn't know this was the author of Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. So yeah, she did the Anna and the French Kiss series, which I feel like was pretty popular or is pretty popular. So it's a little different from a thriller book, which this is a thriller murder mystery kind of book. You're following Makani Young, who I believe was from Hawaii, and she moves to Nebraska, and she's just kind of trying to fit in because she doesn't look like any of the people from Nebraska, obviously, because she's from Hawaii. And while she's there, these murders start taking place, and you're basically following her as she's trying to figure out who is doing all these murders and why. So I actually gave this book 3 stars. I just want to say that 3 stars is not a bad rating at all. It's kind of like a middle rating. Like, oh, I enjoyed reading this book, but would I read it again? No. Would I recommend it? Maybe. I think that this is the perfect book to read during this time, like during October. Obviously, October has passed, but I think it would still be a good book to read in the earlier days of November or in November in general because it does have a very fall Halloween October vibe because it takes place in October. They talk about Halloween, there's like pumpkins on people's porches, they do mazes, people are dressing up for Halloween. This is a great book to read during that time. I feel like if I read it during any other time, I might have not enjoyed it as much. You find out pretty early on in the book who is doing the killings, which to me, I feel like doesn't necessarily ruin it, but maybe why I rated it a little bit lower, because throughout the rest of the book, you're just trying to catch the killer and figure out why the killer is targeting people, which to me still isn't something that was super clear. Like, they do explain why the killer is doing the killings, but to me it wasn't like a real reason. Like, it didn't make any sense to me why they were doing it. I guessed who the killer was, but as I said, it's revealed pretty early on in the book. You guess it and then it's just confirmed a couple chapters later. Yeah, this wasn't a bad book at all. There was a subplot of romance in this book as well. I did enjoy it. It was fast-paced. It was a good read at the time, and it was a little bit of a palate cleanser in between the books that I had been reading. I would recommend it specifically more during fall or Halloween because it does give like those vibes. I wouldn't say it's necessarily cozy because people are getting murdered, but yeah, I think it's probably best to read during that time. The next book that I read was Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. I am so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that last name. I really enjoyed this book. I heard a lot of mixed reviews when I was going through on Goodreads and other review sites about this book. I would definitely, if there is like a trigger warning without spoilers, I would look that up because there are some people who have very strong opinions about the topics in this book. So I would definitely recommend checking that out before picking up this book. However, I still enjoyed it. I really liked the aspects of this book and what it was. It's a thriller book, it's a mystery book, and it had that thrilling aspect. So I really enjoyed it for what it was. So more about the actual book and the plot. This is obviously a thriller book, and we are following Mallory Quinn, and she's taking a nannying job straight out of rehab because she struggled with drug problems in the past. So if that's also something that you struggle reading about, I wouldn't recommend picking up this book because she does mention that a lot. It is a big part of her past. It does get brought up a lot. So if that's something that you aren't interested in reading about, I wouldn't pick up this book. If you're looking for a really good thriller book that's super fast-paced, I would recommend this book for sure. So we're following Mallory Quinn as she takes up this nannying job, and she is nannying for Caroline and Ted Maxwell, who are the parents of Teddy Maxwell. And Teddy really enjoys drawing. He's very sweet. He really loves Mallory. He enjoys spending time with Mallory. And so he starts doing all these little drawings. And the drawings progressively get more and more in depth and more talented. Like something that's way beyond a 5-year-old's ability to draw. For example, this is one of the drawings that a 5-year-old did. Mallory starts getting a little confused and she's like, there's no way a 5-year-old can be drawing these drawings. She basically starts to try and figure out what is going on with Teddy, why he's able to draw such amazing drawings, what these drawings are trying to tell her, and all of these other different things that are going on with the family. There is also a subplot of romance in here, so you are following that as well, which I really enjoyed the little subplot of romance. I thought it was really sweet. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a fast-paced thriller, and if you enjoy or maybe are interested in the fact that there's pictures or drawings in it, which is what drew me to reading this book in the first place. I've never seen a thriller book or really any book have like drawings or pictures in it, and I just thought it was really interesting. I would definitely, like I said, check trigger warnings and other things like that if you're interested in reading it, but you don't want like any spoilers. I don't know where you would find that, but yeah, so I would definitely research a little bit before picking up this book. So I know a lot of people are going to be excited to see me holding up this book, and I did start A Court of Thorns and Roses in October. I read the next 3 books: A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Frost and Starlight. Those are all the books that I read for the series in October. So we have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm gonna say Moss because there's 2 A's in it, but please forgive me if I'm saying it wrong. If you have not heard of this book series, I would be very surprised because it is quite popular. I feel like a lot of fantasy readers have read this book. This is a romantasy, I want to say, because it is heavy on the romance throughout all the books. If you don't know about this book, I will explain the basic plot to you. You're following Feyre, who is a human who lives on the human realm side of her lands, I guess you could say. I will show you the map. It might be a little confusing, but I think it's probably one of the easier maps that I've seen for a fantasy book. She lives right there. I don't know if you can see, but she basically lives in the human side realms because humans and fairies are divided. So Feyre and her family are very poor, so Feyre has to go out and hunt for food for them a lot. While Feyre goes out hunting for food for her and her 2 sisters and her father, she sees a wolf who's about to kill a deer that she wants and needs for her family. She's like, I need this deer. This wolf doesn't need this deer. I need this deer. And she's thinking in her head that the wolf kind of looks like it may be Fae. Fae are not allowed to kill humans unless provoked, and vice versa. So they're not allowed to kill each other in this treaty that was made for them. But Feyre kind of ignores that, and she's like, I doubt this is a Fae wolf, but if it is, it deserves death for everything that has happened. So Feyre does end up killing this wolf, and the wolf does end up being Fae. So she's broken the rules of the treaty between humans and Fae. This Fae comes for her, and he's like, you need to come with me or you and your family are basically all going to die. So you need to come with me into my court and live with me. At first Feyre's like, no, I'm not coming with you, but then she realizes that if she doesn't go, she would ultimately be killing her and her family. So she ends up going to the Fae lands with this Fae, and she explores the lands, and she's like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful here, I love it here. And she starts to fall in love with the Fae that brought her there. Things go a little south, and she has to help these Fae who she ultimately hated in the beginning, but now she wants to fight for them, and she wants to help break a curse that was put on the Fae lands. So you follow her throughout that, and you follow her journey. The next books just continue on to that, and it's kind of hard to explain them without giving away any spoilers. But I did give this first book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that it was a great introduction to new fantasy readers such as myself. It was really easy to understand, and the politics were not super heavy because you're in Feyre's point of view, and she doesn't know much about the Fae world either. So as she's learning, you're learning with her, so it was really easy to understand. As for the ratings for the other books, I gave A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second book, 4.5 stars. I gave the third book, A Court of Wings and Ruin, 4.5 stars. And then A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is a novella, which is the 3.5 book, but I'm gonna call it just the 4th book so it's a little bit easier to explain. I gave that book 4 stars. That pretty much concludes what I read in October, so now I'm gonna go through and tell you guys the books that I'm interested in reading in November. But obviously I wanted to finish A Court of Thorns and Roses, the whole series, because as you know, I pretty much read the books all back to back. So I do want to read A Court of Silver Flames in October, and I actually have finished it since, and you will hear my thoughts on that book in my November wrap-up. I read all of the books on my Kindle except for A Court of Thorns and Roses because that is the smallest book besides A Court of Frost and Starlight. So I just kind of read all of them on my Kindle because they are large books and it would be hard for me to read since they are pretty large. Next book that is on my radar for November is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but this book I am currently reading. I'm actually reading this for my Intro to Lit class, and so I should be finishing this book pretty soon since I am required to. I'm also going in and I'm tabbing important things, I feel like, in the book, so that way I can remember it for my class. This book is basically about Nora Seed, who is our main character. She's just kind of really not happy with how her life is going. I would definitely read trigger warnings about this book before going into it because where I'm at in the book, I'm not super far in. I'm about 60 pages in. It is a little depressing. She kind of gets thrown into this place called the Midnight Library, which is a place between life and death. She gets to go through this Midnight Library, which is full of stories about herself, how her life could have been, what it could have been if she made different decisions. And you basically follow her going through these stories of what her life could have been. I feel like even if I didn't have to read this book for my class, that if I heard about it, I would probably pick it up because it does sound really interesting. The author talks about a lot of topics regarding mental health and depression and anxiety. So if that's something that you're interested in reading about, I would pick up this book. If I were to say what genre this is, I would say literary fiction fantasy, because the Midnight Library is not like something that would be seen in real life, so I would say that it's a little bit borderline fantasy, but more literary fiction. It's discussing topics like mental health, so that's kind of what I would describe to put it in a genre. So I think this next book is no surprise. I think most people will be putting this on their TBR for November because it did just come out 2 days ago. I pre-ordered it, but Amazon was not really liking me, so I actually had to go in store and buy the copy, and I did happen to get the sprayed edges. Just ignore the fact that the first couple pages are damaged because I don't want to talk about it, even though I literally picked up this book and I examined it thoroughly and somehow I missed that. I think I was having a little bit of anxiety with all the people in the bookstore at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yes, so Iron Flame, if you haven't heard, it's the second book to the first book, which is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. If you haven't read that book, I'm not going to explain the synopsis of this one because I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't read the first book. But the first book basically follows Violet. She has to go to this war college. She gets thrown into the Dragon Rider quadrant, which she was not prepared to go in at all. Her whole life she was training to be a scribe in the scribe quadrant, which is more about the history of where she lives. So she basically gets thrown into this rider's quadrant, which if I were to compare it to anything in the real world or real life, it's basically like the military. Most people go in and they don't survive, but if you do end up surviving and you make it through all the tests, you get to go to thrashing, which is when the dragon chooses you, not you choosing the dragon. Your dragon chooses you. Follow her through all of that. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that, I believe I talked about it in my last video. I did give that book 5 stars, so I really enjoyed that book. If you are new to fantasy and you want something that's easy to understand and has enemies to lovers, close proximity, all of that fun stuff, I would highly recommend picking up that book. And then when you finish that book, you can go ahead and pick up Iron Flame, because this is the second book. The final book that I'm gonna go ahead and put in this video is Threads That Bind. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name because I know I'm definitely gonna butcher that, but this is the author right here. I have never heard of this author before, so this is my first time picking up something by her. I actually don't know much about this book. I believe it involves like some Greek mythology aspects in it. The first line says, "In the city of Atlantis, the descendants of the Greek gods live alongside mortals." I also believe they have these threads that connect to people. Yeah, so there are threads that connect to people, and the main character can see these threads. When a person dies, the thread is cut, and she uses this gift that she has, and she is a private investigator, which sounds pretty cool. And she witnesses a murder, but she sees that the killer's life thread is severed. So she tries to figure that out. So I believe it's kind of like a murder mystery, and there's also a romance in here, and it also involves a little bit of Greek mythology. So there's a lot going on in this book, but I'm really interested in it. That is the final book that I have for my November TBR. If I happen to read more than that, you guys will see that in my November wrap up. Those were the books that were on my October reads and my November TBR. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Comment down below if you read any of the books I am planning to read in November and if you've liked those, but please no spoilers because obviously I have not read them yet. I'm gonna have to stay off social media and try to avoid all of the Iron Flame spoilers that I know are probably out there already. Thankfully, I haven't gotten any spoilers yet. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!